I've been wanting to remake this video for a while now. One of the most popular videos on this channel was the oldest recorded video of Native American tribes. But there was no context to it. I just put it on the channel and it did well. But I wanted to make another video and actually have some background to why these dances were done, who they were, and what tribe it was. So we'll start with actually the first one of the two, because they actually are related. So the Buffalo Dance, this first one is called the Buffalo Dance or the Bison Dance, is a yearly dance celebration for many Native American Plains tribes. The Cheyenne, the Pawnee, the Omaha, and specifically here, the Sioux. So this festival typically happens when buffalo herds return and includes a big feast and a dance where like some of the men would wear buffalo and other animal skins. And they did this because the buffalo and bison were very crucial parts to their society, and they had to make sure they did everything they could to have the herd return to provide enough food and resources. So this first video was shot in 1894. It's a 16-second. I'm going to have it on repeat. But the original 16 seconds, it's in black and white and silent film because we're still in the silent film era. And it's called the Buffalo Dance and it shows people doing their traditional dances. And it's known as the earliest film that we know of Native American tribes. And the Buffalo Dance isn't just a standalone festival. It can be part of bigger ceremonies like the Sun Dance. In some communities, it's even like a dance linked to healing, where they call on the spirit of the buffalo to actually cure the sick. So the next video, and I'm putting them together because they are related. So this first video was shot September 24th of 1894, and it was shot at Edison's Black Maria studio in West Orange, New Jersey. But per film historian C. Musser, who is an Edison film historian, this footage was actually shot the same day. The Buffalo Dance was actually shot the same day as this next film, which is the Ghost Dance. And they came to the studio, then the Sioux put their full regalia on, and then they did these traditional dances on film. So I haven't found anything about why they did that. Could be for awareness of, bringing information of what the tribes were. Could be for like the Ghost Dance, which I'm about to go over, was done for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, so it could be advertising. But they came into an actual studio, so it looks like it's not out in the wild. It isn't. And I've posted this video and pictures in the past where people have made comments saying, oh, their color looks off, and this looks like this other way. This is the earliest, some of the earliest film we have. It's not, shot in any modern technology. We're still, a long way away from, actual movies. So, it shot in 1894 and then being restored and kept preserved till now. There's going to be some like wear down of the film. So it's not some different, it's Sioux people showing their traditional dances. So to go into the Buffalo Dance, the Ghost Dance, the second video. So they talked about these native peoples as show Indians, and they're mainly actors from the Plains nations like the Lakota, the Dakota, the Nakona, known as what the Sioux people are. And it took place in the Wild West shows, not just Buffalo Bills, but there was a lot of Wild West shows going on right now. They wanted to show people on the East Coast back, in St. Louis and Philadelphia. They wanted to show them what was happening out in the Wild West, places where they couldn't. They just hear stories. So they would literally bring shows of like Custer's Last Stand. They'd bring that to them and show them this is what happened in real time, and they'd use these show Indians to represent them. So they were usually hired to be like staged Indian races in supposed historical battles, often portrayed like savagery and wildness in attack scenes against white people. These shows generally depicted native people as exotic savages engaging in bizarre rites and cruel violence. Native women were dressed in like pretty expletive, non-traditional clothes like men's headdresses and breastplates, combined with like pretty, skimpy attire, like especially for the time, like leather shorts, which wouldn't be worn in their reality. And this is where they performed the Sioux ghost dance. So again, it was shot the same day as the Buffalo Dance in the same studio, same day, same everything. So that's why it kind of it kind of looks the same, because it was the same day. But some other people who showed up to these Wild West shows, specifically like Buffalo Bill and like Cody's Wild West show, Chief Sitting Bull, one of the most famous chiefs, was one of the star attractions alongside Annie Oakley. During his time with the show, Sitting Bull met President Grover Cleveland, which he believed highlighted his importance as a chief. And he gave a cherished horse to him when he left the show, and he was friends with Buffalo Bill. Another native chief, Red Eagle, underwent 3-year training period at Cody's base in North Platte, Nebraska. And during that time, he developed skills in steer roping, lariat tricks, like rope tricks, and the art of maintaining like pretty much a firm grip on anything with 4 legs. And he debuted at 13, portrayed like a Pony Express rider. And a year later, the show actually toured Europe. And over several years, Red Eagle became like a crucial member of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, captivating like audiences through his journey. Other famous Native American names that pop up in these Wild West shows, Red Cloud, like we just talked about, Chief Joseph, Geronimo, and the Modoc War Scout, a man named Donald McKay. Behold the Comanche, the lords of the Great Plains, a force to be reckoned with as they reigned unyielding over their domain. With an iron fist, they forged their destiny, leaving a mark upon the annals of history. Mounted on horseback, they embraced a sacred kinship with these majestic beasts, a bond that set them apart, making them pioneers of unparalleled horsemanship. In the heart of the wild frontier, where danger lurked in every shadow, the Comanche cast a shadow of awe and trepidation upon their foes. So formidable were they that their very existence gave rise to the legendary Texas Rangers, a force created to quell the raw power of the Comanche and preserve order in the land they roam. But the Comanche's legacy of ingenuity extended beyond the battlefield, for it was they who ignited the spark of innovation that birthed the revolution of the 6-shooter revolving pistol. A weapon of unparalleled speed and deadly precision, it became an icon of the untamed West, a testament to the Comanche's mastery of warfare and their lasting impact on the ever-evolving frontier. This is not just a tale of a tribe. This is a saga of fearless warriors and visionary leaders. It is a story of battles won and lost, of victories that echoed through the plains, and defeats that only fueled their resolve. With bravery coursing through their veins, they clashed with the forces of change, standing steadfast against the relentless tides of history. So gather around and listen to the echoes of their past, their thundering hooves of 1,000 horses charging into the unknown. The Comanche story is etched upon the vast canvas of time, a testament to their spirit, their resilience, and their unyielding pursuit of freedom. Witness the saga of the Comanche, the lords of the Great Plains, as it unfolds before your eyes. Let their legacy inspire awe and reverence, for they are more than just warriors. They are the architects of a new frontier, the guardians of a way of life, and the embodiment of the untamed soul of the Wild West. The Comanche people were bound by language and tradition to their kin, the Eastern Shoshone of Wyoming. In the vibrant tapestries of the 16th century, the Comanches broke away from the Shoshone, embarking on a momentous journey southward, setting their sights on the untamed lands of Colorado. There, like the Eastern Shoshone, they transformed into relentless nomads of the Great Plains, skilled in the art of bison hunting. Legend whispers that the Great Plains beckoned them forth, lured by the embrace of wetter climates that cradle the burgeoning bison population. It was a land ripe with promise and opportunity, and the Comanche heeded its call. In the southern reaches of Colorado, the Comanche forged an unbreakable alliance with the Ute tribe, two kindred spirits bound by shared ways of survival. As the late 17th century bathed the landscape in the hues of time, both tribes embraced a similar rhythm of life. As autumn's chill set in, the Comanche splintered into small, agile groups, their spirits attuned to the ways of the hunter-gatherer in the picturesque western realm of Colorado, caressed by the San Luis Valley beauty. Yet, with the birth of each new spring, the pulse of the Comanche and Ute quickened. Like thundering herds, they crossed the formidable Sangre de Cristo Mountains, leaving a trail of stories etched in the earth. Together, they journeyed eastward, drawn to the boundless expanse of the Great Plains, where bison roamed in abundance, a testament to nature's blessing. In the midst of these times, fate's hands bestowed a gift upon the Comanche, the elusive secret of taming horses. The yearning for freedom, intensified by the tales of Spanish horses available to native peoples after the Pueblo peoples rose up and cast out the Spanish invaders from New Mexico, was finally fulfilled in the 1680s. The swift and nimble horses granted the Comanche the wings of the wind, turning them into wide-ranging nomads and masters of the open plains. The tapestry of history weaves on, and the first European mention of the Comanche resounds in 1706. A Spanish soldier named Juan de Alabari had brought forth tales from a distant Pueblo settlement of Taos, where rumors danced in the air. Whispers of impending attacks by the infidel enemies, the Ute and Comanche tribes, reached his ears. Yet fate took another turn, and the feared assault never came to pass. Nevertheless, a legacy of fearsome raiders, fierce and unyielding, took root in the annals of time, forever etching the Comanche into the realm of legend. The Ute word, Comanche, bestowed the name by which the Comanche would be known. Yet they called themselves Nimini, resounding with the gentle meaning of the people, an identity close to their hearts. When the French encountered them before the sun-kissed 1740 horizon, they bestowed upon themselves Paducah, a title they also granted the Apache, igniting confusion in the early chapters of French interaction with these awe-inspiring peoples whose history flowed like a river through the ages. Comanche history in the 18th century unfolds into three distinct and captivating chapters, each interwoven with tales of alliances, conquests, and challenges with neighboring peoples. The first chapter revolves around the Comanche's entanglements with the Spanish, Puebloans, Ute, and Apache tribes of New Mexico. By the late 18th century, two distinct groups of Comanche had emerged. The western bands, dwelling in the vast expanse of New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, and the Texas Panhandle, had their gaze fixed upon the Spanish settlement in New Mexico. On the other hand, the eastern band, dwelling in the enchanting landscapes of southwest Oklahoma and central Texas, had their eyes set on Spanish settlements in Texas. As they navigated through their complex relationships with these neighboring peoples, a new challenge loomed on the eastern border of the Great Plains: the French and their formidable Indian allies. And this was just the beginning. For the 19th century would even bring more challenges with the arrival of the immigrant five civilized tribes of Oklahoma and the Anglo settlers of Texas, forever altering the course of Comanche history. Of course, these tribes were forced immigrated to Oklahoma, but the five civilized tribes of Oklahoma were a new challenge. Anyway, moving on. One remarkable aspect of the Comanche people was their legendary horsemanship. They rode with grace and skill, a sight to behold as they pursued bison, their lifeblood, their main source of sustenance. In the early 18th century, the Ute and Comanches, perhaps junior partners in their alliance at the time, rose to prominence on the northern frontier of the Spanish New Mexico. While their activities often involved pilfering of livestock, tensions escalated when the governor of New Mexico launched a fateful attack on a peaceful Ute Comanche camp. Lives were lost, captives were taken, and the conflict grew more heated. The Ute and Comanche struck back, launching a massive raid into Taos region that claimed lives. The Spanish responded with an expedition comprising of more than 700 troops, mainly consisting of Pueblos and Apache. But the elusive Ute and Comanche proved difficult to find. Instead, the expedition discovered the plight of the Apache people in the southern Colorado, who suffered at the hands of the Ute and Comanche. Some Apache bands sought refuge closer to the Spanish settlement in New Mexico, while others clung to their hostility towards both the Spanish and the Comanche. In the following decades, the Comanche solidified their hold on the Arkansas River Valley of Colorado, reaching a pivotal point in the 1730s when they became their pioneering, fully mounted bison hunting nomads of the Great Plains. The very first American Indians to adopt an equestrian lifestyle. Their mastery of horsemanship allowed them to push the Apache south and westward, expanding the territory and cultural dominance. As the Apache grew in strength, their ties with the Ute began to fray, with cultural and political divisions emerging in the 1730s. In 1749, the Ute sought aid from the Spanish of New Mexico to confront the Comanche in a war that would persist through the 18th century. While the Ute's concerns remained important, the Comanche faced even grander challenges on their remarkable journey through history. In 1749, the captivating lands of New Mexico and its Pueblo and Spanish inhabitants were home to a population of merely 15,000. Amidst this delicate balance, the mighty Comanche, undeterred by military setbacks, began their ascension to dominance over the colony. A dance of trade and raid unfolded as the Comanche asserted their prowess. The echoes of conflict resounded through the canyons in 1747, as a force of more than 500 Spanish and Puebloan men unleashed their fury upon a Comanche and Ute camp, leaving a trail of devastation. Lives were lost, captives taken, and a wind of change whispered. In 1751, history repeated itself as Spanish and Puebloan troops skillfully trapped 300 Comanche in a box canyon, a moment that would forever be etched in the annals of time. Carnage unfolded, lives were extinguished, and the Comanche, facing these defeats, sought peace. Their peace agreement of 1752 favored them, granting trade privileges and recognition as a sovereign nation, empowering them to wage war against the Ute, their old friends. However, peace, like shifting sands, proved fragile. The year 1767 ushered a relentless campaign led by the Comanche, leaving hundreds of Spanish and Puebloan in its wake, and the Rio Grande Valley of New Mexico lay in ruins. The Spanish responded, unleashing a powerful response in 1774. Their troops surrounded a Comanche band, and a heart-wrenching spectacle unfolded as lives were lost, families torn apart, and the fates of the captured sealed in sorrow. Yet, the Comanche persevered, strengthening their grip on New Mexico, undeterred by the trials they faced. A significant turning point arrived in 1779, when the valiant governor Juan Bautista de Anza, renowned for his expertise in Indian warfare, took the battle directly to the Comanche in their heartland. With a formidable force at his side, including Ute and Apache auxiliaries, he marched northward, making a chapter of epic proportions. The powerful Comanche war leader, Cuerno Verde, met his fate in the Greenhorn Valley of Colorado, surrounded by the echoes of battle. While raids did not entirely cease, the idea of peace gained traction, especially with the Eastern Comanche in Texas, when they struck a peace treaty heralding for hope in an era of reconciliation. Among the Western Comanche, the struggle for peace was personified by the enigmatic White Bull. The peace faction within the Comanche determined to see an end to the bloodshed and took decisive action to grant power to make peace to the esteemed leader Acapara. Moments of tension and negotiation followed, with Pecos and Comanche camps bearing witness to history's unfolding. Finally, in July of 1786, a signed treaty was sent to Mexico City, sealing the peace of 1786, a momentous event that brought an end to major hostilities between the Comanche and the Spanish and Puebloans of New Mexico. This newfound peace ushered in an era of cooperation. The Comanche and Spanish joined forces against their mutual enemy, the Apache. Settlements extended eastward onto the Great Plains, and the population of New Mexico soared. Tokens of goodwill flowed as the Spanish lavished the Comanche with gifts, lifting trade restrictions on weapons and ammunition. Even a few Comanche children attended Spanish schools, symbolizing a unique and complex intermingling of cultures. Travelers ventured across the plains, unburdened by the fear, as a class of traders, the Comancheros, paved the way for trade between Spanish goods and the Comanche heartland in the Texas Panhandle, where buffalo robes, meat, and horses exchanged hands. With New Mexico as a haven, the Comanche embarked on raids that pierced the heart of Mexico, invoking awe and trepidation. In 1841, when faced with the Mexican central government's orders to wage war on the Comanche, New Mexico Governor Manuel Armijo hesitated, for such a conflict would spell doom for the land he held dear. Before we move forward on our timeline with the Comanche, I did want to take a step back in time to talk specifically about the Comanche's arrival in Texas. So we first see the Comanche in Spanish Texas in 1743, when a scouting party made their presence known in San Antonio. By that time, the formidable Comanche had already driven the Apache off the Great Plains, forcing them into southern Texas, where they became known as the Lipan Apache. Some sought refuge in a desolate desert of the Southwest, while others formed uneasy alliances with the Spanish in New Mexico. The Spanish and Lipan, though once at odds, found common ground in 1749 as they united to resist the Comanche threat, forging a frail peace treaty that would prove short-lived. The 1750s saw the rise of a powerful alliance, as the Comanche joined forces with the Norteños, a group of tribes residing north of the Spanish settlements. Among these allies were the Wichita, with their influential sub-tribe, a tribe named Talvayas, having migrated southward to the Red River Valley of Oklahoma and Texas. Alongside the Tonkawa of the Texas Plains and the Hassenias, the westernmost of the Caddo people, they formed a formidable alliance. In 1758, this united force, including the Comanche, pillaged the San Saba Mission, a strategic Spanish endeavor aimed at converting the Lipan to Christianity. Seeking revenge, a Spanish and Indian army launched an assault on two fortified Tavaya villages in the Red River Valley, only to be thwarted in the Battle of the Twin Villages. Initially, the Comanche engaged in trade with the agricultural Wichita tribe, exchanging buffalo pelts and meat for maize or corn. The Wichita also served as intermediaries, facilitating the trade of Comanche horses to Spanish colonies in Louisiana. However, as the 1770s unfolded, the alliance faltered. Devastating outbreaks of European diseases weakened the Wichitas, prompting the Comanches to shift their focus eastward, directly trading with the Spanish and French populations of Louisiana. Simultaneously, the Spanish faced threats from the formidable Osage tribe on the northeastern frontier and Apache raids south of the Rio Grande River in Mexico. Seeking peace, they extended an olive branch to the Comanche. Yet, tragedy struck in 1778 when a Comanche peace delegation was massacred in eastern Texas, sparking a vicious assault by the Comanche on Spanish settlements and other Indian tribes. The Spanish dream of establishing a powerful colony in Texas to counter the advance of British and French colonists seemed to crumble as the Comanches launched relentless attacks, leaving the Spanish reeling. However, in 1780 and 1781, a smallpox epidemic swept through the Indian population, impacting even the Comanche. As both Spanish and Comanche realized they had other interests and common enemies, a shift towards peace began to emerge. Guided by the mediation of the Wichita, negotiations between Pedro Vial and the eastern Comanche, spearheaded by Comanche-speaking Francisco Xavier Chavez, brought up an agreement in 1785. This accord involved generous gifts to the Comanche and the return of all Spanish prisoners held captive by the tribe. Such a significant development paved the way for a similar peace agreement between the Spanish of New Mexico and the Western Comanche in 1786, marking a turning point in the turbulent history of Spanish Texas and the Comanche. In the grand tapestry of history, the French had few direct encounters with the mighty Comanche. Instead, their interactions were indirect, as they traded with various Indian tribes residing on the eastern border of the Great Plains. Early in the 18th century, French traders thrived along the lower Missouri River and in the vast expanse of Louisiana. Unlike the Spanish, whose interests encompassed colonization, exploitation of mineral wealth, and the spread of Christianity among the native peoples, the French were primarily driven by economic pursuits. In 1720, the Spanish sought to expel French traders from the plains and dispatch a military expedition, only to meet a tragic end at the hands of the Pawnee in Nebraska. However, the French did make some headway in their quest for contact with the Comanche, as evidenced by encounters between the Mallet brothers and the Comanche. They called them the Latane, probably pronouncing that wrong, in 1739 along the Arkansas River in Colorado. This interaction paved the way for significant peace agreement between the Wichita and the Comanches in 1746, mediated by the French. Amidst the sprawling plains of the eastern Great Plains, the Comanche encountered formidable adversaries, chief among them the Osage tribe. The Osage's staunch resistance barred the Comanche from venturing eastward beyond certain territories in Kansas and Oklahoma. The 18th century saw the Osage expand from the Missouri homeland onto the Great Plains to hunt bison, fulfilling the French demand for bison robes and actually also for slaves. The Osage enjoyed ready access to French products, specifically the valuable firearm. As a result of Osage hostility, the Wichita, trusted trading partners and allies of the Comanche, were forced to migrate southward to the Red River Valley of Oklahoma and Texas, leaving their former lands in northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas around 1750. Meanwhile, in northern Kansas and Nebraska, the Comanche and Pawnee clashed in a sporadic warfare, their paths fraught with raids for slaves and horses. Battles and skirmishes marked their interactions as both tribes sought to assert their dominance in the region. These encounters with the Pawnee, another powerful tribe allied with the French, added yet another layer of complexity to the Comanche's interactions with the European powers. By the dawn of the 19th century, the Comanche had evolved into a formidable force, controlling a vast expanse of 200,000 square miles in the Great Plains. Their large herds of horses served as valuable commodity, and the seemingly endless bison herds sustained their way of life. However, the smallpox epidemic of 1780 and 1781 dealt a significant blow to their numbers, and although recurring smallpox and other European diseases continued to take their toll, the Comanche population persisted around 20,000, bolstered by captives adopted into the tribe. In 1790, the Comanche found new Native American partners with 2,000 Kiowa and Kiowa Apaches, joining them in the Comanche as allies. Amid the delicate balance of accommodation and antagonism with the Spanish, peace agreements endured, even though the French were no longer a presence after selling Louisiana to the United States in 1803. The arrival of Anglo-Americans on the borders of the Comanche brought both promise and peril for the Comanche. As the Spanish presence dwindled, the Americans surged with their vast numbers, creating new opportunities and challenges. The United States boasted a population of 10 million by 1820, with Anglo-Americans settling in Texas and creating a robust market for Comanche horses and mules. Irish-born Philip Nolan was among the first American traders to venture into Comanche territory in the 1790s. The Anglo market provided the Comanche with a lucrative trade, enabling them to acquire goods and products previously available only through their interactions with Spanish and French. Yet, this newfound market also heightened tensions and conflicts. As the Anglo-American presence grew, so did their influence, altering the dynamics of the Comanche's interaction with the European powers. However, amidst the changing times, the Comanche maintained their identity as a powerful and influential nation. They adapted to shifting political landscapes, forming strategic alliances and engaging in trade with various European powers and other tribes. Nevertheless, the Comanche's aspiration for independence and control over their territories remained unwavering. The peace with the Spanish in Texas began to falter after 1795 and the Mexican War of Independence, which commenced in 1810, further straining the relations. The Comanche's tribute, once provided by the Spanish, diminished as Mexico faced resource constraints in its remote provinces. In 1822, Mexico sought to quell the Comanche threat by inviting Comanche leaders to Mexico City, culminating in a treaty granting trading privileges to the tribe. As the Mexican government opened Texas to foreign settlers in 1824, the Anglo-Americans, who were already trading extensively with the Comanche, swarmed into the region. The concern of the Mexicans was real, and tensions escalated. In 1825, 330 Comanche rode into San Antonio, pillaged and reveled for 6 days. In 1832, 500 Comanche occupied San Antonio with little resistance from Mexican soldiers. The weakened state of Mexican Texas set the stage for the Anglo-Americans to claim independence of Texas from Mexico in 1836. The once mighty Comanche, with their storied history and territorial dominance, faced an uncertain future as they navigated the winds of change in this rapidly transforming world. As the Anglo-Americans solidified their hold over Texas and expanded westward, the Comanche found themselves confronting new challenges and threats to their way of life. The influx of Anglo settlers and their insatiable demand for land and resources put immense pressure on the Comanche's traditional territories. The vast herds of bison, once a symbol of their abundance and sustenance, dwindled due to overhunting by both newcomers and Native American tribes forced to compete for resources. The Comanche had long relied on bison for their livelihood, so the depletion of the majestic creatures deeply impacted their ability to maintain their nomadic lifestyle. The Comanche's interaction with Anglo-Americans were marked by both collaboration and conflict, as you can imagine. The Anglo settlers sought to control their vast prairies, while the Comanche fiercely defended their ancestral lands and way of life. Raids and skirmishes became more frequent as tensions between the two groups escalated. The Comanche were formidable warriors, skilled horsemen. I think that's an understatement. They were masters of horse. And they were masters as well at guerrilla warfare, posing a formidable challenge to the encroaching Anglo-American settlers. The Texas Rangers, a group of frontier lawmen, emerged as a prominent force in confronting the Comanche threat. The Rangers engaged in a series of campaigns to push back the Comanche raids and secure the borders of the rapidly expanding Republic of Texas. However, the Comanche's resiliency and the adaptability defied easy containment, and they continued to pose a formidable challenge to settlers. By 1836, a momentous year for Texas as it gained its independence, and we can go into another video with the full explanation of Texas and the Alamo and all that good stuff, but the demographic landscape had undergone a dramatic transformation. The relentless influx of Anglo immigrants had tipped the scales, erasing the once dominant position of the Comanche and their allies. From a modest population of fewer than 5,000 Spanish inhabitants in the early 19th century, Texas swelled to accommodate 38,000 Spanish and Anglo settlers by 1836. The Native American population, including the formidable Comanche, were estimated to be around 14,000, though this figure may have been an underestimation. The winds of change brought forth not only human migration, but also the scourge of smallpox, which ravaged the Native American communities, further diminishing their numbers by the late 1830s. Amidst the shifting landscape, the Comanche sought to secure their place and forge crucial alliances. In 1840, a significant agreement with the southern branches of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes heralded newfound unity and strength for the Comanche. The treaty ended the long-standing conflict on the Comanche's northern frontier, with about 2,000 Cheyenne and Arapaho warriors pledging allegiance to the Comanche cause. As emissaries of peace, they were welcomed into the Comancheria, the vast domain of the Comanche, where the age-old custom of gift-giving cemented the bond between the tribes. The Comanche's generosity knew no bounds, as they bestowed about 5 horses from their impressive herds upon each Cheyenne and Arapaho man and woman, a gesture symbolizing trust and cooperation. The birth of the Republic of Texas brought both opportunity and challenges in dealing with the Comanche. Early on, in May of 1836, a violent encounter near Fort Parker, south of Dallas, saw Comanche and Kiowa warriors claiming 5 lives and abducted 5 women and children, including 9-year-old Cynthia Ann Parker. Remember this name, this woman is very, very important. Little did anyone know that Cynthia Ann's life would take an extraordinary turn, eventually marrying a Comanche chief named Pita Nakona and giving birth to a son who would grow up to be the legendary war chief Quanah Parker, which is the most famous Comanche war chief of all time, in my opinion, who was a prominent figure in the tribe's later history. So Cynthia Ann Parker, kidnapped from South Dallas, would eventually give birth to Quanah Parker. The Comanche society, with its values and emphasis on acquiring wealth, readily integrated captives into their fold. The need for labor to manage their vast domain made captives valuable assets, and the Comanche were known for their resourcefulness in assimilating diverse individuals into their own way of life. As the political landscape shifted, so did the approach of Texas leaders towards the Comanche. While the first president of Texas, Sam Houston, sought peaceful coexistence, his successor, Mirabeau B. Lamar, took a more direct approach in confronting the Comanche. In 1840, a peace delegation from the Comanche arrived in San Antonio, but a dispute over captives quickly turned into a tragic incident known as the Council House Fight. Texas soldiers killed 35 Comanche, including several chiefs, escalating hostilities. In response, the Comanche, under the leadership of Buffalo Hump, unleashed the Great Raid of 1840, a formidable campaign that struck fear into the hearts of Texans. Sacking the towns of Victoria and Linville, they left a trail of destruction, taking numerous captives and seizing valuable goods. An ambush by the Texas militia, with the aid of Tonkawa scouts and the Battle of Plum Creek, momentarily quelled the Comanche's bold advances. The Texas militia later launched an attack on a Comanche village, resulting in tragic loss of 140 men, women, and children. These clashes left a profound impact on both sides as the cost of warfare began to take its toll on the finances of the Texas government. As peace became a coveted goal for both Texas and Comanche, negotiations led to the signing of a treaty in December of 1845. The agreement established a line of trading houses, serving as a de facto border between Texas and the Comanche area. In exchange for refraining from raids within Texas, the Comanche were granted gifts and trading privileges with the Texas settlers. The tumultuous times in the mid-19th century reflected the complex and evolving relationship between the Comanche and the rapidly transforming landscape of Texas. The once dominant Comanche nation navigated shifting political alliances, cultural changes, and looming specter of the westward expansion, all while endeavoring to preserve their unique way of life amidst the rapidly changing world. Through the late 1860s and into the 1870s, the Comanche people found themselves embroiled in a complex web of conflicts, broken treaties, and shifting alliances. The encroachment of white settlers into the Comanche area had triggered a series of clashes, leading to retaliatory raids, broken promises, and deep-seated animosities on both sides. As the United States government attempted to enforce its treaties with the Comanches and other tribes, they faced numerous challenges. The annuities promised to the tribes in exchange for peace often fell short of expectations, causing widespread disappointment among the Comanche people. Instead of receiving the guns and ammunition and quality goods they had hoped for, they were left with rotting Civil War rations and subpar blankets that could hardly withstand the rain. These unfulfilled promises, combined with the ever-encroaching white settler, left the Comanches feeling frustrated and betrayed. As the frontier continued to expand westward, the Comanche's traditional way of life came under increasing threat. The vast herds of bison, which had once provided them with sustenance and a marketable commodity through horse trading, were now rapidly dwindling due to overhunting by settlers and expansion of railroads. Moreover, the Comanche society had been significantly weakened by the devastating epidemics of smallpox and cholera brought by the wave of immigration from the California Gold Rush in the late 1840s. These diseases had decimated their numbers and further eroded their ability to resist the encroachment of settlers. The Texas Rangers played a crucial role in further exacerbating the tensions. Often operating beyond the state lines, they pursued the Comanche into Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, and even into Mexico, retaliating for raids in Texas. While some Comanche divisions signed treaties and sought peaceful resolutions, Others, like the Quanah, remained defiant and refused to be bound by the agreements. The situation became increasingly complex with the outbreak of the Civil War. The Comanche peoples found themselves caught in the crossfire of conflict, with some factions aligning with the Confederacy, while others maintained their hostility towards white settlers and their interests. The chaotic nature of war further complicated matters, leaving Comanches and other tribes uncertain about who to trust and what actions to take. The end of the Civil War brought a sense of hope and peace, as government commissioners met with the Plains tribes to arrange a new treaty. The Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867 granted the Comanches in the Kiowa a vast reservation in southwestern Oklahoma, intended to be the new home for these tribes. However, this move was met with resistance, as many Comanche chose to remain on the Staked Plains, refusing to accept the treaty's terms. As tensions continued to simmer, the Comanches and Kiowa found themselves in conflict with the other Plains tribes, like the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho, who had formed a general alliance against the encroaching settlers. This further complicated the situation, with various tribes vying for territorial control and limited resources. The persistent violence and broken promises took a toll on both sides, leading to a vicious cycle of retaliatory raids and conflicts. The Comanche people, once known as fierce warriors, faced significant challenges as their traditional way of life and territory were threatened by the ever-expanding United States. By the mid-1870s, the Comanches had mostly settled on a reservation in Oklahoma, but their population had dwindled and they continued to face hardships and challenges. Their once thriving society, reliant on the buffalo and vast herds of horses, had been disrupted, leaving them grappling with the changes brought on by the relentless march of the white settlers. In the 19th century, the relentless pursuit of European settlers nearly drove the majestic bison to the brink of extinction. It actually did bring it to the brink of extinction. Once millions roamed freely across the continent, but by the late 1880s, less than 100 remained in the wild. It just blows my mind. From millions, some say 30 million, to less than 100 remained in the wild. This drastic decline was not due to indigenous hunting practices, where every part of the animal was used respectfully, but rather the mass slaughtering by settlers who had their eyes set on bison's valuable skins and tongues alone. The rest of the animal was left to rot and decay on the unforgiving ground. The European hunters exploited the bison's roaming behavior to their advantage. When one bison fell to a hunter's gun, the others would instinctively gather around it, unwittingly presenting themselves as targets. The ease of which one bison could be killed often meant the tragic destruction of an entire herd. As settlers' greed and destruction escalated, maps of the extermination of the bison showcased the devastating range reductions. Where once their domain stretched as far and wide, only now scattered pockets of bison territory remained. There's an essay from the time painted a vivid picture of the relentless slaughter. Quote, 30 years ago, millions of great unwieldy animals existed on this continent. Innumerable droves roamed, comparatively undisturbed and unmolested. Many thousands have been ruthlessly and shamefully slain every season for the past 20 years or more by white hunters and tourists merely for their robes, and in a sheer wanton sport, and their huge carcasses left to fester and rot, and their bleached skeletons to strewn the deserts and the lonely plains. This senseless destruction of the bison also had profound consequences for the indigenous peoples who lived and their culture depended on the buffalo. While some tried to maintain their traditional ways, others were forced to adapt a new hunting style to survive. Some even embraced the fur trade, altering the hunting methods to include horseback hunting, which allowed them to cover more ground and more bison. Yet, the commercial incentives for settlers were undeniable. Bison hunting became a means of economic gain, with trappers and traders profiting from the sale of buffalo fur. The harsh winter saw over 1.5 million buffalo put on trains and transported eastward. Bison leather found various uses, including making machinery belts and army boots, further binding natives to the settler economy. The involvement of the U.S. Army in the mass bison slaughter was one of the most tragic chapters in this dark tale. The federal government saw bison hunting as a tool to pressure native tribes, specifically the Comanche, because they used their horses, the lords of horses. They used these horses to hunt the bison. So you snuff out the bison. What are you going to do to the Comanche? They used these tools to pressure the native tribes on the reservations by depriving them of their primary food source. Without the bison, many of these plains tribes were left with no other option but to abandon their lands or face starvation. General William Tecumseh Sherman advocated for the mass hunting of bison, believing it would force the indigenous people to assimilate into, quote, a civilized life. Other military leaders shared the same sentiment, seeing the bison as a means to an end for taming the frontier. So you take away the food, you tame the frontier, because the Comanche and other tribes don't have anything to eat. They have to accept the terms of going on a on a reservation. President Ulysses S. Grant vetoes an act that would protect buffalo from overhunting. So there's law, hey, we should protect this animal. Ulysses S. Grant vetoes it, and it just further exemplified the government's lack of concern for the iconic animal. In their eyes, the bison's demise would aid in the forced assimilation of the indigenous people. The relentless decimation of the buffalo was in many ways emblematic of the larger struggle between settlers and the Comanche. The buffalo's fate became intertwined with the destiny of the native tribes and served as kind of a tragic symbol of the profound impact of colonization on the people and wildlife of the American plains. On the chilling morning of November 10th of 1864, a determined Kit Carson embarked on a perilous journey from Fort Bascom, leading a formidable force of 260 cavalry, 75 infantry, and 72 skilled Ute and Apache scouts recruited from Lucien Maxwell's ranch near Cimarron, New Mexico. Their mission was to march through the harsh landscapes of the Texas Panhandle with the hopes of reaching Adobe Walls, a place familiar to Carson from his past employment with Bent 2 decades earlier. The weather was unkind, and inclement conditions, including early snowstorms, slowed their progress. Despite the daunting obstacles, Kit Carson pressed on, his trust in his Indian scouts unwavering. These adept trackers covered the flanks of the slow-moving column, venturing ahead each morning to scout for Comanche and Kiowa encampments. After days of arduous travel, the scouts made a significant discovery. On November 24th, the trail of a large Indian village. Carson seized the opportunity and ordered a night march of his cavalry and artillery, leaving his infantry behind to guard the supply train. With the Ute and Apache scouts by his side, Carson led the charge, his heart set on quelling the threat of these hostile tribes. The clash was inevitable, and as dawn broke on November 25th, the roar of battle echoed across the plains. Kit Carson's cavalry attacked a Kiowa village of 176 lodges, causing the chief and his people to flee, alerting the nearby Comanche villages to join the fray. What Carson had expected to be a manageable confrontation turned into a formidable challenge. The Kiowa Plains Apache and Comanche warriors relentlessly charged, armed with paint and feathers, their war cries piercing the air. Carson deployed his cavalry strategically around the 2 howitzers, while the Indian scouts skirmished with the enemy, both sides locked into fierce combat. The sound of gunfire and bugle calls mingled, creating an atmosphere of chaos and danger. Carson's clever use of the howitzers prevented an all-out disaster, but the relentless attacks of the Comanche and Kiowa forces made him use a crucial decision: to retreat. With howitzers' shells running low and his troops weary, Carson ordered the retreat to the Kiowa village, skillfully navigating through the Indians' attempt to block their path with fire. In the twilight, the soldiers set fire to the Kiowa lodges, igniting chaos and confusion amongst the enemy. Exhausted but triumphant, they made it back to their supply train that night. As the weary soldiers rested in the camp on November 26th, their defeated opponents watched from a distant hilltop, a palpable tension lingering in the air. Some of Carson's officers urged him to renew the battle, but he sought counsel only from his trusted Utes and Apache. Ultimately, he chose to order the retreat back to New Mexico, leaving the Texas Panhandle to the Comanche and Kiowa for the next 8 years. The United States Army claimed the Battle of the First Adobe Walls as a victory, But the Kiowa held a different perspective, recording the period as, quote, a muddy travel winter, the time when the Kiowa repelled Kit Carson. Regardless of the outcome, the battle marked a significant turning point. The last time the Comanche in Kiowa would force American troops to retreat from the battlefield. It signaled the beginning of the end for the once mighty Plains tribes and their way of life. Now we jump ahead 10 years to the Second Battle of Adobe Walls. In June of 1874, a group of audacious businessmen, fueled by dreams of prosperity, dared to revive the town of Adobe Walls. They set up 2 stores, creating a bustling complex that catered to the needs of 200 to 300 buffalo hunters in the area. The air buzzed with anticipation and danger as tales of Indians spread like wildfire, drawing a large crowd to the walls where both opportunity and peril loomed. The remaining free-ranging Southern Plains bands, the Comanche, the Cheyenne, the Kiowa, and the Arapaho, saw a resurgence of Adobe Walls and the booming buffalo hunting as a dire threat to their way of life. The 1867 Medicine Lodge Treaty had designated the region between the Arkansas River and Canadian River as Indian hunting grounds, but the violation of this treaty by buffalo hunting parties sparked outrage amongst the indigenous tribes. In the spring of 1874, the Indians held a sacred sun dance, and their medicine man vowed victory and immunity from bullets to those who took up arms against the invaders. On June 25th of 1874, a group of hunters, led by the intrepid James Hanaram, embarked on a fateful journey to the Adobe Walls. Just as the sun kissed the horizon on June 27th, a spectacle of barbaric grandeur unfolded. The war-painted warriors of the Comanche, the Cheyenne, the Kiowa tribes, mounted on their finest horses, charged across the plains with a furious determination. Colors of red, vermilion, splashed their bodies and their steeds. Feathers and war bonnets fluttered in the wind as they descended like a tempest upon Adobe Walls. The initial attack nearly breached the defenses of the hunters. The Indians pounded on the doors and windows with their rifle butts. In the close quarters combat that followed, the hunters fought back with pistols and lever-action rifles. The situation was dire, but the formidable long-range Sharps rifle gave the hunters a fighting chance. The warriors' relentless besiege Adobe Walls caused tension and uneasy to grip the camp. A critical moment came when Billy Dixon, a renowned marksman, took aim from a distance that caused even the bravest warriors to hesitate. His well-placed shot struck a warrior atop his horse, casting doubt and discouragement amongst the attackers. After 6 days of fierce resistance and strategic maneuvering, the Indians finally retreated, realizing the futility of their efforts. Despite the hunters' eventual victory, the aftermath was marked by sorrow and conflict. The buffalo hunting era in the region came to an end. The Texas Panhandle lay sprawled before the converging army columns like an untamed wilderness, a land teeming with ancient spirits and stories of a fierce indigenous people. General Philip Sheridan's orders crackled through the air, commanding 5 mighty columns to muster their forces and converge upon the untamed expanse of the Texas Panhandle. Their target? The upper tributaries of the Red River, a domain believed to harbor the elusive tribes of the Southern Plains. The strategic design was simple yet ruthless. Deny the Indians any safe haven and unleash an unrelenting torrent of attacks until they were compelled to submit permanently to the reservation system. Colonel Ronald S. McKenzie, a seasoned and resolute leader, commanded 3 of the formidable columns. Like a thundering storm, the 10th Cavalry, under the steadfast Lieutenant Colonel John W. Davidson, surged westward from the strong fortress of Fort Sill. The 11th Infantry, led by the indomitable Lieutenant Colonel George P. Buell, advanced northwest from the mighty bastion of Fort Griffin. As for McKenzie himself, a warrior with the heart of a lion, he spearheaded the 4th Cavalry on a daring northern march from the stout walls of Fort Concho. Yet, the forces that would converge upon this vast, untamed land did not end there. The 4th column, led by the cunning and experienced Colonel Nelson A. Miles, featured a powerful union of the 6th Cavalry and 5th Infantry. With resolute determination, they advanced relentlessly southward from the unyielding stronghold of Fort Dodge. And in the distance, the 5th column emerged from the eastern horizon. the 8th Cavalry, commanded by the gallant Major William R. Price, marching with precision and purpose. This legion of 225 officers and men, along with 6 intrepid Indian scouts and 2 expert guides, had originated from the storied grounds of Fort Union, embarking on an arduous journey via Fort Bascom in New Mexico. The convergence of these columns heralded the beginning of a relentless and continuous offensive against the tribes in the Texas Panhandle. As many as 20 fierce engagements ensued, each confrontation a momentous clash of cultures and survival instincts. The Army, a disciplined force of soldiers and scouts, relentlessly sought to engage the evasive and agile Indians, specifically the Comanche, at every opportunity. The tribes, on the other hand, journeyed with their women, children, and elders, striving to avoid direct confrontation with the overwhelming force that bore down on them. Yet, when destiny's hands drew them together, the resolute warriors of the Southern Plains attempted to escape before the army could force them into submission. However, the cost of a successful escape was steep, leaving behind precious horses, sustenance, and vital equipment. The army and its Indian scouts, unfettered by such constraints, had access to a wealth of supplies and equipment, and they frequently wielded the might of fire, burning anything that the retreating Indians had left behind. The relentless campaign seemed inexhaustible, capable of continuing indefinitely, like a boundless horizon on the Texas Panhandle. Throughout the fall of 1874, the war's crescendo echoed across the vast expanse, and with every passing day, increasing numbers of Indian tribes were compelled to relinquish their nomadic existence and seek refuge at Fort Sill, succumbing to the reality of the reservation system. Among the countless battles that colored the landscape of the Texas Panhandle, 2 stand out as enduring legends etched in history. The Battle of Upper Washita River, a saga of bravery and tenacity, unfolded on September 9th of 1874. As Captain Willis Lyman and his wagon train of rations approached Camp Supply, they were confronted by a formidable force of Comanches and Kiowas. Like a fortress amid the prairie, the wagon crowd became a bastion of courage, with Lyman and his 95 troops fending off an adversary that numbered around 400. In a valiant effort to seek aid, a scout raced to send word to Camp Supply. Soon after, the valiant 6th Cavalry, without rest and amidst relentless rainstorm, rode to their rescue. When the dust settled, it became known as the Battle of Upper Washita River and the Battle of Lyman's Wagon Train, an epic tale of endurance and camaraderie amid the vast untamed frontier. In the heart of September, another fateful clash unfolded near the rugged terrain of Palo Duro Canyon. With a steely resolve, Tonkawa and Black Seminole scouts advanced ahead of the 4th Cavalry, their eyes and senses ever alert to lurking danger. They narrowly escaped an ambush by the cunning Comanches near the Staked Plains, alerting Colonel Mackenzie of the foe's whereabouts. Their intelligence led the largest army victory of the war, as Mackenzie's scout discovered a sprawling village of Comanche, Kiowa, and Cheyenne nestled within the canyon's embrace. At the dawn of September 28th, Mackenzie's troops launched a ferocious attack, descending upon the unsuspecting village like a thunderbolt. The startled Native Americans, caught off guard and without time to gather the horses and provisions, faced an overwhelming onslaught. Their warriors fought with desperate valor to shield their women and children and pack animals. But the persistent fire of the troops forced them to retreat, and the warriors began falling back. The impact was immense and devastating. Mackenzie's men razed over 450 lodges and obliterated countless pounds of buffalo meat, a vital source of sustenance for the tribes. In addition, they captured 1,400 horses, most of which were ruthlessly shot to prevent Indians from recapturing them. The Battle of Palo Duro Canyon became a defining moment, leaving a profound mark on the war's trajectory. While most encounters resulted in little to no casualties, the cumulative loss of resources, sustenance, and mounts weighed heavily upon the tribes. An Indian band caught on foot and with limited options for food found themselves at the mercy of their adversary, with little choice but to surrender and seek refuge in the reservation system. Finally, in June of 1875, the relentless pursuit of the army culminated in a decisive outcome, marking the end of the Red River War. Quanah Parker, I don't know if you remember back when his mother was captured, as I remember this name, Quanah Parker, the war leader of the Comanche, and his band of Quahati Comanches, the last of the large roaming bands of the southwestern Indians, entered Fort Sill and surrendered. Their submission, coupled with the extermination of the buffalo, left the Texas Panhandle permanently open to the onward march of settlers, farmers, and ranchers, who would irrevocably shape the destiny of the untamed lands. With the final military defeat, the once powerful Southern Plains tribes were forever changed, and the curtain fell upon the Texas Indian Wars, leaving behind a legacy that resonated through our ages. The Comanche traditional way of life had been uprooted by the relentless advances of the American Army, and their once abundant food source, the buffalo or bison, had been decimated to near extinction. And as we just talked about, the resilient Comanche, led by Quanah Parker, had just finally succumbed to the mounting pressure and decided to accept the reservation life. But our story doesn't end here. We need to discuss Quanah Parker and the continuation of the Comanche people. Quanah Parker had a house built called the Star House, which is nestled in the vast expanse of Cache, Oklahoma, and it was Quanah Parker's sanctuary. It symbolized his authority as a respected chief. The spacious two-story dwelling stood as a testament to his growing influence and prosperity. Inside its walls, there was a bedroom for each of his 7 wives and their children, a testament to the custom of his ancestors. Quanah Parker himself had a rather plain private quarters, but beside his bed, framed photographs of his mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, and his younger sister served as a cherished memento, connecting him to his past and driving his vision for the future. A remarkable chapter in Quanah Parker's life unfolded when he embarked on hunting trips with none other than President Theodore Roosevelt himself, who held him in high regard. The president, captivated by Quanah Parker's warrior spirit and wisdom, often sought his company and valued his counsel. Despite these close ties to the world of the white man, Quanah Parker clung to his native roots, rejecting both monogamy and traditional Protestant Christianity in favor of the Native American church movement, which he co-founded. This new spiritual path became a sanctuary for him, an avenue to embrace his ancestral heritage while navigating the shifting tides of the modern world. However, Quanah Parker's most profound and enduring friendships blossomed with the Burnett family. Their bond transcended the boundaries of culture and race, forging an unbreakable connection that was a testament to the respect and admiration that was held for each other. The Burnett family was known for their cattle empire, and they welcomed Quanah Parker into their fold, treating him as an honored guest and a true friend. A unique exhibition of cultural artifacts gifted from the Parker family to the Burnetts attested to the depth of their relationship. Remember, Comanche people, in the earlier times especially, the gift-giving cemented the bond between peoples. Together, Quanah Parker and the Burnetts experience a myriad of adventures, from parades with a large group of Comanche warriors at the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show to wolf hunting expeditions with President Roosevelt. They shared moments that solidified their mutual admiration and respect. Burnett's advocacy for the Native American rights and his respect for their customs endeared him to the tribes. The Comanches recognized his importance to their lives, bestowing upon him his name, Mas Sa Suta, signifying Big Boss in their language. Quanah Parker's legacy extended beyond his interactions with Burnett's family and President Roosevelt. He emerged as a trailblazer, becoming one of the key leaders of the Native American church movement. The sacred peyote medicine, a central element of the movement, was a sacrament bestowed upon the Indian people, and Quanah Parker was an instrument in its adoption and integration into their spiritual practices. The passing of time eventually led to Quanah Parker's passing in 1911, and he was laid to rest at the Post Oak Mission Cemetery near Cache, Oklahoma. His final resting place bore the epitaph that celebrated his extraordinary journey. A lifetime that traversed from a Stone Age warrior to a statesman of the Industrial Revolution, from a fierce leader who never lost a battle to a visionary who embraced change while preserving his heritage. As the sun sets on the legacy of Quanah Parker, it's impossible to ignore the impact he left on history. His life symbolizes the resilience and adaptability of the Native American tribes and their ability to bridge cultures, their relentless pursuit of a dignified existence in a rapidly changing world. The spirit of Quanah Parker, like the sacred peyote medicine he championed, remains alive and woven into the fabric of Native American history and cultural identity. His name will forever echo through time as a testament to the unyielding spirit of his people and the lasting legacy for an extraordinary leader. So what about the Comanche now in 2023 at the time of this recording? There's still 17,000 enrolled tribal members that breathe life into the Comanche Nation. Among them, around 7,000 actually live in the tribal jurisdiction area, which is in the domains of Lawton, Fort Sill, and the surrounding counties in Oklahoma. The Comanche legacy thrives, passing this general information down from generation to generation, which is a living testament to the strength and unity and resilience of a people that have endured the tests of time. In these hollow lands, the Comanche Nation unfurls its vibrant tapestry, a tale of tenacity and triumph, each thread woven by their governments, their aspirations, and their unwavering spirits, etched a legacy that will endure the ebb and flow of history's tides. Through storms and stillness, the Comanche Nation stands resolute, a beacon of hope and progress forever guided by the spirit of their ancestors and their dreams of the future. The Lords of the Plains. That's what they are, and that's what they were. So we will honor them on this channel. I hope you enjoyed this documentary. I had a blast researching and developing this, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks, y'all. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, famously known as Custer's Last Stand, marked a historic clash between the united forces of the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne tribes and the 7th Cavalry of the United States Army. This pivotal event, one of the most renowned in the Indian Wars, unfolded over 2 fateful days on June 25th and 26th of 1876 in the eastern Montana Territory along the banks of the Little Bighorn River. At the helm of the U.S. Cavalry detachment was the famous Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Tragically, or triumphantly, Custer's entire unit met their demise in this battle. The backdrop of this conflict lay in the simmering tensions between the Sioux and Cheyenne Indians who had left their reservations in late 1875, protesting against the continued intrusion of white settlers into their sacred Black Hills. These defiant Native American groups, led by the illustrious warrior Sitting Bull, assembled in Montana to assert their claim to the ancestral lands. Following 2 previous victories over the U.S. cavalry, their resolve to fight further hardened in the summer of 1876. In response to a report from an Indian inspector that indicated hostility among the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne associated with Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, U.S. forces were dispatched on November 9, 1875. The lure of gold in the Black Hills was another factor driving the military engagement. Like it usually was, the draw of money was pushing settlers and expansion of U.S. into territories they're not supposed to be in. Lieutenant Colonel Custer, leading the largest contingent with General Alfred Terry's command, arrived at an outlook 14 miles east of the Little Bighorn River on the night of June 24th of 1876. The rest of the column advanced towards the mouth of the Little Bighorn to block potential escape routes for the Indians. Meanwhile, 2 Crow Indian scouts were sent ahead to assess the situation. They returned with a critical warning of a vast Indian encampment at the Little Bighorn River. Regrettably, Custer chose to disregard this crucial information, dividing his regiment into 4 groups with intentions to press ahead with the attack, believing that the Indians would flee upon seeing the approaching soldiers. Thus, on June 25th, Custer's men moved forward with disastrous consequences. Lacking precise knowledge of the encampment size, Major Marcus Reno was ordered to initiate the attack, positioning his squadron of 175 soldiers at the southern end of the Indian village. However, they swiftly realized that the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne forces were far larger and showed no signs of retreat. Reno dispatched a message to Custer but received no reply. Consequently, Reno's troops advanced northward, halted their exchange due to fear of entrapment, dismounted, and engaged the village from a distance. After approximately 20 minutes, with only one casualty and no sign of Custer's promised reinforcements, Reno ordered a retreat into the nearby timber and brush along the river. They were relentlessly pursued by a mix of Cheyenne and Sioux soldiers, sustaining casualties as they fled. Continuing their retreat uphill to the bluffs east of the river, Reno's force encountered a squadron under Captain Frederick Benteen. Benteen had been seen by Custer to prevent Indian escape through the upper valley of the Little Bighorn River. His timely arrival on the bluffs saves Reno men from potential annihilation. Although the combined forces were later joined by a small contingent escorting Benteen's pack train, they did not advance towards Custer's position for at least an hour, despite the sound of intense gunfire from the north. This delay led to criticism that Benteen had failed to follow orders to march to the sound of guns. Meanwhile, Custer had planned to strike the northern end of the Indian encampment simultaneously with Reno's southern attack. However, Custer underestimated the challenging terrain he had to traverse before launching his assault, navigating bluffs and ravines. As he finally arrived at a position from which to attack, Reno had already been repelled by the Indians, who detected Custer and his men approaching from the opposite end of the village. The Cheyenne and Sioux crossed the river and pushed into the advancing soldiers, driving them back to a long elevated ridge to the north. Concurrently, a force of Sioux under Crazy Horse's command rapidly moved downstream and executed a sweeping arc encircling Custer and his men. As the Indians closed in on Custer, situated some 3.5 miles north of Reno and Benteen, Custer ordered his men to shoot their horses and create a makeshift barrier. Unfortunately, this provided minimal protection against the hail of bullets and arrows, and Custer, along with his 210 men, succumbed to the relentless assault in less than an hour. Notably, the Lakota and Cheyenne outnumbered the U.S. forces roughly 3-1. Following the decimation of Custer's troops, the Lakota and Cheyenne turned their attention to the remaining U.S. forces under Benteen and Reno, who had finally responded to the audible fighting in Custer's vicinity. Over the next 24 hours, these forces engaged in a grueling battle until the arrival of additional troops under General Terry from the north finally arrived and secured the U.S. lines. With the defenses bolstered, the Indians retreated southward. By the time General Terry arrived, the Indians had removed their deceased and wounded from the battlefield. However, the bodies of the fallen U.S. soldiers remained where they had perished, many of them stripped and mutilated, making identification challenging. Despite medical treatments, 6 wounded soldiers later succumbed to their injuries. Custer's lifeless body was discovered near the hill's summit, now marked by a memorial bearing the names of the U.S. soldiers who participated in the battle. Although he had been shot in the temple and chest, his body remained largely unaltered, possibly because he was clad in buckskin rather than a military uniform. Alongside Custer, 210 men met their end while another 52 lost their lives under Reno's command. They were given hasty burials while an estimated 60 Indian warriors perished in the battle. Pretty crazy numbers compared to U.S. deaths and Lakota and Cheyenne deaths. This tragic encounter, which occurred shortly before the nation's centennial, significantly shifted public sentiment against the Native Americans. The U.S. Army responded by deploying more troops to the region, aiming to quell the Indians and exact revenge for the Battle of Little Bighorn. It took 3 years for an Army court inquiry to investigate the battle in 1879. During the proceedings, the actions of Reno, Benteen, Terry, and Custer were scrutinized. Testimonies portrayed Reno as a drunk and a coward, while Benteen was chastised for disobeying Custer's orders. General Terry's belated arrival was also a contributing factor. However, the primary cause of the U.S. defeat was attributed to flawed intelligence and poor communication. Both Reno and Benteen's military careers were subsequently cut short. In the same year as the military investigation, the Little Bighorn battlefield was designated as a national cemetery under the War Department's administration. In 1881, a memorial was erected over the mass grave of the 7th Cavalry soldiers, U.S. Indian Scouts, and other personnel who perished in the battle. In 1940, the jurisdiction of the battlefield was transferred to the National Park Service. Over time, public sentiment regarding Custer's image and the Battle of Little Bighorn evolved as awareness of the mistreatment of the Native Americans during America's westward expansion grew. In 1991, the U.S. Congress changed the battlefield's names from Custer's Battlefield National Monument to Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, mandating the construction of an Indian memorial. Today, additional red granite memorials pay homage to the Native American warriors who fought in the battle, including Cheyenne warriors Lame White Man and Noisy Walking, as well as Lakota warriors Long Road and Dog's Backbone. The Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument is situated in the southeastern corner of Montana, near Crow Agency, and is administered still by the National Parks Service. In the summer of 1874, a pivotal chapter unfolded on the sprawling canvas of the American frontier. The U.S. Army embarked on a determined campaign with the intent of dislodging the Comanche, Kiowa, the Southern Cheyenne, and Arapaho Indian tribes from their ancestral domains on the southern plains of the United States. This ambitious undertaking sought to enforce the relocation of these tribes to the designated reservations in the Indian Territory, a monumental shift that would forever alter their way of life. The echoes of this campaign, known as the Red River War, resonate through the chronicles of Texas history, etching a narrative of profound transformation and conflict. Numerous threads interwove to set the stage for the military's decisive intervention. The relentless tide of westward-bound settlers converged with the nomadic tribes whose roots were intertwined with the buffalo-laden plains throughout the 19th century. As these settlers faced mounting clashes with indigenous communities, the Army forged a network of frontier forts to offer a semblance of protection. However, the crucible of the Civil War triggered a withdrawal of military presence from the westward expanses, enabling the tribes to assert their dominance over the southern plains in a period of opportune upheaval. The incursion of these tribes into the forefront of national affairs stirred a resounding call for government intervention. Amidst the intricate backdrop of the Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867 emerged as a beacon of resolution. The treaty created two reservations within the Indian Territory, one designated for the Comanche and the Kiowa, and another for the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho. Eager for peace, the tribes agreed to the terms that held the promise of basic services, vocational training, housing, and crucial sustenance in forms of food, supplies, and even firearms and ammunition to support their hunting practices. This accord carried a noble vision, allowing the tribes to continue hunting in the lands south of the Arkansas River as long as the buffalo roamed there. A coalition of 10 tribal chiefs lent their endorsement to the treaty, spurring voluntary migrations to the reservation as a sign of good faith. Yet, the treaty's lofty aspirations were dashed against the jagged rocks of reality. The enterprises of commercial buffalo hunters scorned the treaty's confines, invading the territory that had been solemnly pledged to the Southern Plains tribes. The swift decimation of the majestic southern bison herds, which had long been the lifeblood of these tribes, transpired with a mere 4 years, spanning from 1874 to 1878. The ruthless hunters perpetrated a wide-scale massacre of these revered creatures, ruthlessly gathering their hides for trade back east and forsaking the carcasses to fester upon the plains. Astonishingly, the U.S. government remained silent. I don't know if that's super astonishing, but they did remain silent, failing to stem the environment catastrophe. This wholesale extermination of buffalo dealt a crippling blow to the tribes, driving them into the clutches of dependency upon the reservation provisions. The pledges and assurances of the U.S. government, though grand in word, yielded a bitter harvest of delusion for the tribes. Inadequate and often subpar rations greeted them, while the confinements imposed by reservation boundaries clashed profoundly with the tribe's ancestral instincts to roam the open plains with unbridled freedom. As the tendrils of discontent wound even tighter around the reservation, a palpable sense of desperation gripped the indigenous populations. By the spring of 1874, the weight of dissatisfaction hung heavy upon these lands. Conditions soured, and a steady exodus commenced,
as many Indians left the reservations behind, rejoining the renegade bands that had retreated to the vast expanse of the Texas plains. Whispers of rebellion and resistance circulated amongst the tribes, mingling with aspirations of reclaiming their ancestral lands. In the cauldron of unrest, a figure named Aes Sedai emerged as a beacon of inspiration and a harbinger of conflict. A prominent leader and revered prophet of the Quahati band of Comanches, Aes Sedai wielded spiritual power of great magnitude. His incitement to wage war against the encroaching white settlers reverberated across the plains. The conditions of the time, marked by despair and desperation, paved a way for Aes Sedai's message to find receptive ears amongst the Indian leaders. They were faced with some choices. They could either succumb to starvation or rise in armed defense, and the indigenous leaders swiftly aligned with Aes Sedai's vision of resistance. So a strategy was made. The plan to assail and obliterate a nearby settlement of buffalo hunters at a place called Adobe Walls, a crucial juncture in the narrative of the Red River War. The First Battle of Adobe Walls. In 1864, Brigadier General James H. Carleton stood at the helm of the Department of New Mexico, and he was faced with a daunting task. Put an end to the relentless onslaught of Indian attacks on white settlers journeying across the paths of the Santa Fe Trail en route to the New Mexico Territory. To answer the call, the famous Kit Carson was summoned, a battle-hardened figure fresh from a campaign against the Apache and Navajo tribes in the heart of New Mexico. Kit Carson's mandate now resonated with stern retribution against the Kiowa and Comanche tribes. Kit Carson assembled 336 Californian and New Mexico volunteers, bolstered by the presence of 75 Ute and Apache auxiliaries. The decisive moment arrived on the fateful November 25th of 1864, when Carson orchestrated a planned assault on a nearby Kiowa village. The aftermath led Carson's battle-worn company to find refuge amidst the ancient ruins of the Adobe Walls. However, dawn unveiled the grim surprise. The Kiowa, joined by the fierce Comanche, unleashed a brazen counterattack against Carson and his forces entrenched at Adobe Walls. Despite being confronted by an intimidating amount of 1,000, warriors, Kit Carson's troops did hold steadfast when they had 2 howitzers sending support to keep the attacks at bay. As twilight cast its somber cloak, a strategic retreat from the bastion to Fort Bascom in New Mexico was enacted, preceded by the incendiary act of setting one of the encampments ablaze. The brutal clash had a pretty big toll. 3 souls of Carson's ranks were lost, while another 15 bore some physical scars of the battle. In stark contrast, the tally of indigenous casualties was about 60. The Brigadier General James H. Carleton, unswerving valor in the face of the odds, was etched into history, a testament to courage in the adversity that resonated through the great expanse of the Great Plains, earning him laurels as a paragon of resolve. Now, there are 2 battles of Adobe Walls. The first one involved Kit Carson. The second one, this is all leading up to Red River War. So this is what's happening in Texas, North Texas specifically, that sparks the Red River War. So this is kind of the background of this. The second Battle of Adobe Walls was a decade later, after the initial Battle of the Adobe Walls, when a group of merchants from Dodge City, Kansas, yes, the famous Dodge City, Kansas, followed the path of the buffalo hunters into the Texas Panhandle. Panhandle is the very tip-top of Texas. They were established a sprawling complex known as Myers and Leonard Store near the ruins of Fort Adobe. This establishment included facilities such as a corral and a restaurant designed primarily to cater to the growing number of buffalo hunters in the area. The momentum of trade at Adobe Walls escalated further with the opening of a second store in April of 1874, run by Charles Rath and Company. Soon after, James N. Hannaran, I think I'm saying that right, Hannaran, and Charles Rath, the one who opened the store, launched a bustling saloon, and Tom O'Keefe initiated a blacksmith shop. As Smith blossomed, the area was frequented by 200 to 300 buffalo hunters, contributing to a pretty thriving trade scene. Remaining indigenous inhabitants perceived the post and buffalo hunting as a grave threat to their way of life, and in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of other people, it was correct. They were a direct threat to their way of life. During the spring, the Indians organized a sun dance during which Comanche medicine man Aes Sedai prophesied the victory of warriors engaged in battle against the encroaching buffalo hunters. Remember our old friend Aes Sedai. In the early hours of June 27th of 1874, a combined force of 700 Comanche, Cheyenne, and Kiowa and Arapaho warriors, led by Comanche chief Quanah Parker and Aes Sedai, launched an attack on buffalo hunters' camp. Seeking shelter, the hunters took refuge in 2 stores and a saloon. Remember, in my last video of the Comanche history, Quanah Parker is the most famous Comanche chief and ended up kind of being the leader, the religious leader, and a government leader of the Comanche after the reservation, or during the reservation. Just a side note. Despite the post being manned by only 28 men, including notable figures Bat Masterson, the famous lawman of the Wild West, and Billy Dixon, who was a famous buffalo hunter, Aes Sedai's prophecy turned out to just be an illusion. Remarkably outnumbered, the hunters' superior weaponry managed to fend off the Indian assault. The tales of Billy Dixon's prowess submerged with his alleged remarkable shot inside James Hanran's saloon. And I hope I'm saying that right, James Hanran. Though its accuracy has been disputed, Dixon has never personally claimed credit for his incredible shooting. After 4 days of unrelenting battle, reinforcements arrived, bolstering the post's strength by about 100 men, and that prompted the forces of the Comanche and Kiowa and Arapaho to retreat. While estimates varied to up to 70 Indian casualties were reported, including Quanah Parker was supposedly wounded during this battle as well. The outcome of the Adobe Walls engagement proved to be both a spiritual blow to the indigenous tribes and the catalyst to the Red River War. This is what sparked it, of 1874 and 1875, eventually leading to the final location of the Southern Plains Indians to designated reservations. Most of the battles of the Red River War were fleeting clashes with a few fighters and low casualties, but some monumental encounters stood out. Let's turn to the first battle, the Red River. Picture this. A fateful day of August, 1874. Colonel Nelson A. Miles led troops from the 6th Cavalry and 5th Infantry into the vast expanse of southern Armstrong and northern Briscoe counties of Texas. What followed was a gripping day-long saga known as the Battle of Red River. Imagine rugged canyon lands, where around 650 well-armed Army soldiers boasting Gatling guns and a formidable 10-pounder Parrott rifle engaged in a relentless pursuit of Southern Cheyenne warriors. Incredibly, and despite the odds, the Cheyenne managed to stave off the relentless assault long enough for their families to slip away into safety of the canyons and vanish across the staked plains. Now, let's turn our focus to Major William R. Price's expedition. In a daring move, he led the companies C, H, K, and L of the 8th U.S. Cavalry from Fort Union, New Mexico, towards the Texas Panhandle. A column of 216 soldiers, accompanied by 2 formidable mountain howitzers and a substantial supply train, as they embarked on a journey across the vast Texas Panhandle. On September 12th, as they ventured northeast between Sweetwater Creek and the dry fork of the Washita River, a tense encounter unfolded. Here, they faced off against a band of Kiowa and Comanche Indians led by the indomitable Kiowa chief, Lone Wolf. A high ridge north of Sweetwater Creek in Wheeler County, Texas, became the stage of the Battle of Sweetwater Creek. But unbeknownst to Major Price and his soldiers, Indian families lay hidden behind the ridge, desperately seeking escape. These warriors, led by Lone Wolf, skillfully distracted the troops, enabling their families to slip away to safety. The resulting running battle spanned 4 intense hours and covered 7 miles of terrain. Now, while Major Price's column faced its own trials, Captain Willis Lyman was entrusted with a perilous mission. Imagine him leading a military escort comprising of 36 infantry, 20 cavalry, and 36 civilian teamsters, of whom only 10 were armed, as they embarked on a journey to resupply camp supply so resupply, the camp named supply, in Indian territory. On September 9th, as they ventured back towards the Red River with crucial supplies, they found themselves under relentless attack by Kiowa and Comanche warriors. Visualize this chaotic scene unfolding as warriors fired from a distance, forcing the cavalry to maneuver through challenging terrain. Ultimately, they reached a steep ravine towards the north of the Rashida River, where Captain Lyman ordered the wagons to perform the famous protective corral. We've all seen the corral in Western films. Circle the wagons. As the Indians relentlessly pressed their attack, a fierce skirmish unfolded. Sergeant d'Armand fell, Lieutenant Granville Lewis suffered a severe wound, and teamster named Sanford was mortally wounded while carrying ammunition. Yet, despite the initial assault, the Indians retreated to the surrounding ridges, laying siege to the wagon train. Now, with nightfall, the battle ebbed, but the Indians' intent to maintain the siege was evident. Now, Captain Lyman's resolved as he ordered the men to dig rifle pits, and the circle train provided additional protection. The next morning, with the Indians resuming their relentless fire, the situation grew pretty dire, prompting Lyman to send a scout named W.F. Shamsley to seek the help from Camp Supply. Remember, they're trying to bring supplies to Camp Supply. Shamsley's daring escape pursued by relentless Indians, and he ultimately reached Camp Supply 2 days later. September 12th marked the beginning of the Indians actually abandoning this siege. Now, picture a cold rainstorm enveloping the besieged troops, continuing through the next day. The soldiers, nearly out of supplies, found themselves in a grim predicament. Horses were injured, and 22 mules from the wagon lay dead. In the early hours of September 14th, Company K arrived from Camp Supply with much-needed aid and ambulance. Captain Lyman and his wagons could finally move on, rejoining Colonel Miles. For their unwavering bravery during the battle, Colonel Miles recommended 13 troopers of the Medal of Honor, and Captain Lyman was duly promoted. On that same September morning, about 125 warriors who had besieged the Lyman wagon train decided to regroup south of the Washita River. As they reached a small rise north of Gageby Creek, they stumbled upon a small detachment of 6 men from Colonel Miles' command tasked with locating Lyman's wagon train. This detachment included civilian scouts Billy Dixon, who we talked about in Adobe Walls, and Amos Chapman, along with 4 6th Cavalry soldiers. Imagine these men encircled by Indians with limited cover and mounting tension. Private Smith, who held the horses' reins as chaos erupted, was quickly shot and fell as the horses stampeded. The intensity of the ensuing battle, where these courageous men, except for Dixon, were all wounded. Billy Dixon's keen eye spotted a small buffalo wallow, a shallow depression of the plain, and he made a daring dash for it. 3 others joined him, and together they began digging with knives and creating kind of a makeshift fortification. Outside the wallow, Private Smith lay wounded, and Chapman suffered a crippling leg wound. Dixon's determination persisted as he managed to reach and rescue Chapman. As the afternoon wore on and ammunition grew scarce, their only hope was to retrieve the revolver and ammunition belt from the fallen Private Smith. A man named Private Rath made the perilous run, retrieving the items and discovering that Smith was miraculously still alive, although he was fatally wounded. A storm rolled in, offered kind of an unexpected respite, and the Indians withdrew into the night because of the storm. Billy Dixon leaving the wallow on foot the next morning to seek help of the wounded men. After a brief journey, he encountered the 8th Cavalry under Major Price's command, and Colonel Miles orchestrated their rescue upon learning of their plight. Though all 6 men were initially awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, Dixon and Chapman's medals were later revoked due to their unofficial enlistment into the Army. A heartwarming twist occurred in 1989 when the Army Board of Correction of Military Records reinstated Dixon and Chapman's well-deserved medals. We say well-deserved. They were slaughtering indigenous peoples and putting them on a reservation, but to the U.S. Army, they saw this as a double thumbs up. As September 28th of 1874 dawned, a pivotal moment of the Red River War unfolded. Imagine at least 5 Indian villages seeking refuge within the concealed depths of the Palo Duro Canyon. Remember, all these families are trying to escape the U.S. Army, and they're going deeper into these canyons, and they're kind of finding their way into Palo Duro Canyon. Now envision Colonel Ronald S. McKenzie leading the 4th Cavalry charging fearlessly into that canyon. The scattered Indian leaders, including Iron Shirt of the Cheyenne, Poor Buffalo of the Comanche, and Lone Wolf of the Kiowa, struggled to mount a unified defense. The soldiers captured and set ablaze the villages, including the crucial winter stores. Additionally, they secured 1,424 Indian horses, driving them some 20 miles away from the heart-wrenching cold, 1,000 of them, to prevent recapture by the Indians. So they found the 1,424 horses, they drove them 20 miles away, and they killed 1,000 of them to prevent the Indian tribes from capturing them back and using them to hunt on their ancestral lands. After this pivotal battle, the hardships faced by the remaining Indians stripped of provisions because their food stores were burned and their villages were burned and their horses were killed, and now winter's approaching. Many began drifting back to the reservations in the following months. The U.S. Army continued its relentless efforts to clear the Texas Panhandle of Indian holdouts and ultimately bringing an end to the Indian War, the Red River War, on the South Plains. I do talk about this war a little differently than I do most things on the channel. This is the end, as America knew it at the time, this is the end of the Southern Plains tribes. This is the planned extermination of these tribes too. So although I get to enjoy a lot of things, specifically I live here in Texas, I get to enjoy a lot of things about the state. I can't look past that's what the Red River War was, is the final takedown of these pretty incredible tribes. This is the end for the Southern Plains Indians, and they're moved to the reservation after this because their villages were burned, their stores that they worked to help get them through the winter were destroyed, and now it's, even though it was reservation or fight, now it is just reservation or starve to death outside the reservation. So you either have to play by the rules or you're going to die outside the rules. So I do talk with a little more disdain in this video, but it's a powerful message being sent by the U.S. Armed Forces that it's not even about comply anymore. It's you are accepting a new way of life that we're providing for you, and then even that was taken. So anyway, if you hear a little weird inflection in my voice, that's why. I find this war, especially as a Texan, pretty gross, but it does need to be covered. We need to learn all the fun stuff about the Wild West. We also need to learn about the things that were really happening and what the effects were. So I hope you enjoy this video. I have been out for a while. I've been down sick. You can still hear it in my voice, but I hope you still are enjoying the content, and please subscribe. Thank y'all.
Quanah Parker stands out as the most renowned figure in Comanche history, facing formidable challenges to ensure the safety of his people. Despite not holding the formal title of head chief, he is widely recognized as the ultimate leader of the Comanche. The pivotal Red River War, as discussed in one of our previous videos, it marked a significant turning point for the Comanche people. In the aftermath, Quanah Parker assumed the weighty responsibility of surrendering his nation to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Quanah Parker was actually born into the Nakoni band, or the Wanderers, under the Comanche umbrella. He was then spent his formative years with the Quahandes, where his parents, notable parents, Quahande Comanche chief Pete Nakona, and his mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, which was actually a white settler who was abducted at the age of 8 that kind of assimilated into the tribe. Before we go further into Quanah's life, we need to kind of touch on Cynthia Ann Parker because she's pretty pivotal, and maybe that's why Quanah Parker made the decisions he made in his later life. So Cynthia Ann Parker was born around 1827 and belonged to prominent Parker frontier family that settled in East Texas in the 1830s. In a dramatic turn of events, she was captured by the Comanches at the age of 8 or 9 during the raid on Fort Parker, which is in present-day Groesbeck, Texas, in 1836. Bestowed with the Comanche name Nadao, meaning foundling, for you Mandalorian fans, the foundlings, she was embraced by the Nakoni band of Comanches, and she became the foster daughter of Tabinoka, which is a chief there. Fully assimilating into Comanche life, Cynthia Ann Parker married Pete Nakona, the Quahandi warrior chief, known as a bunch of different names, but the main name is Pete Nakona. Quanah Parker, their firstborn, entered the world in Wichita Mountains of southwestern Oklahoma around 1850, according to his letter to rancher Charles Goodnight. Alternative sources suggested his birthplace as Laguna Sabinas or Cedar Lake in Gaines County, Texas. So Cynthia Ann Parker and Pete Nakona also had two more children, Pecos, or they called him Pecan, and Topsana, or Prairie Flower. The family faced tumultuous events in December of 1860, when Cynthia Ann Parker and Topsana were captured in the Battle of Peace River. Conflicting accounts arose regarding Pete Nakona's fate, with some asserting he was wounded and killed, while others, including Quanah Parker, actually dispute this narrative. Subsequently, Cynthia Ann Parker, Quanah Parker's mother, and her infant daughter were taken against their will by the Texas Rangers. After 24 years with the Comanche, Cynthia Ann Parker resisted reassimilation, and her daughter Topsana tragically succumbed to illness in 1863. Struggling with her changed circumstances, Cynthia Ann Parker starved herself to death, so she committed suicide. YouTube doesn't like that word, but we're going to use it for historical references. She committed suicide by starving herself to death in March of 1871. So after the death of Pete Nakona, we think around 1864, with a man named Parakum, or Bull Bear, assuming leadership as the head chief of the Quahandi people, and Horseback leading the Coney people. Quanah Parker and his brother Pecos found guidance under Horseback's mentorship. Building on the teachings of Pete Nakona and Iron Jacket, Horseback imparted the traditions of the Comanche warrior upon them, and Quanah Parker rose to prominence as a formidable warrior. Departing briefly, he later rejoined the Quahandi band alongside warriors from another group. In October of 1867, a young Quanah Parker participated as an observer in treaty negotiations at Medicine Lodge, Kansas, accompanying the Comanche chiefs. Horseback notably spoke about Quanah Parker's refusal to sign the treaty during these negotiations. As the 1870s dawned, the Plains Indians faced mounting challenges in their struggles against the U.S. government for their land. The capture of Kiowa Chief Sitting Bear, Big Tree, and Santana marked a turning point in the Kiowa, Comanche, and Southern Cheyenne tribes joined forces in response. Colonel Ronald McKenzie, who we've talked about in a previous video, played a key role in rounding up and confronting Indians who had not settled on reservations. They're trying to find them and put them someplace where they didn't have to deal with them on the open plains. In 1873, Asatai, I still don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, from one of our previous videos, but Asatai, who was a self-proclaimed Comanche medicine man, called for a gathering of all Comanche bands for a Sundance, a Kiowa ritual not typical among the Comanche. At the gathering near the Red River, Asatai and Quanah Parker recruited warriors for retaliatory raids into Texas from Oklahoma. However, some Comanche chiefs, including Isa Rosa, which was named White Wolf, and a man named Sound of the Sunrise, awesome name, recognized the real threat posed by buffalo hide merchants to their way of life. Suggesting an alternative target, these chiefs proposed focusing on the merchants rather than engaging in raids. A war party influenced by Aisatai's claim of protective medicine headed towards the trading post of Adobe Walls. I keep referencing it, but we've talked about the Comanche before. I have a whole video on the Adobe Walls. We're going to touch on it briefly, but there's an intricate video about the importance of the Adobe Walls battle in super North Texas. So the attempted raid on Adobe Walls, marked by the resilience of the saloon keeper and merchants armed with 50 caliber Sharps rifles, way outpowered what the Comanche had, resulted in a decisive turning point. Quanah Parker, leading the charge, faced adversary as his horse was shot from underneath him, and he himself sustained a non-fatal injury. The attack triggered a shift in Washington's policy, leading to the Red River War, culminating in the Battle of Palo Duro Canyon on September 28th of 1874. Mackenzie, our old friend Mackenzie, we touched on briefly, in his Tonkawa Scouts, who are actually found a lot more in central Texas where I am, and kind of allied with the Americans to scout specifically against the Comanche. We're going to do a video just on the Tonkawa. So the Tonkawa scouts dismantled along with the U.S. forces, dismantled the Comanche village at Palo Duro, dealing a significant blow and destroying nearly all of the Comanche horses, which was their source of wealth and power. It's about 1,500 horses died during this. That's a lot. The Comanche ultimately kind of surrendering in 1875. So collaborating with Colonel Mackenzie and Indian agent James M. Hayworth, Quanah Parker played a pivotal role in the resettlement of the Comanche onto the Kiowa Comanche Apache Reservation in southwestern Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. So let's move on a little bit towards Quanah Parker's life after his warrior. So we know he's famous before that, but he gets really important going further. He does a lot for the Comanche. Some of it is people think is a good thing. Some of them think he's just a complete sellout, but we're here to just report on that. So they put Quanah Parker into the reservation. They built him a massive house. It's still standing. It's called the Star House in Cache, Oklahoma. And that was his residence. I'll show pictures of it, but it is like a traditional house with heat and stars literally on the roof, and big beams, front porches. So he started drawing a lot of attention from other tribe members and also very important people in America. Specifically, one of the most famous presidents of the time and maybe ever in the United States, President Theodore Roosevelt. Quanah Parker would engage in hunting excursions with Roosevelt, forging a unique connection between them. Despite such associations, he diverged from mainstream norms. He did not believe in monogamy or the traditional Protestant church, but instead, Quanah Parker embraced the tenets of the Native American church movement, standing as one of its founding members. So the choice reflected his commitment to preserving and advancing the spiritual heritage of his people. So accepting that their way of life has come to an end, but we're not going to give up on everything. We're gonna push forward and change a couple things, but keep on to our own traditions. So with Quanah Parker being credited as one of the early leaders of the Native American church movement, his main addition to that was the introduction of the peyote religion, with the psychedelic drug that you see in the peace pipes, into the Native American church movement. So this followed after he had a near-fatal encounter with a bull in Texas, pretty Texas of him to almost be killed by a bull, where he sustained pretty severe wounds. Seeking healing, a Mexican curandera prepared a potent peyote tea, say that 3 times, prepared a potent peyote tea, sparking Quanah Parker's involvement with the peyote religion. He was taught that peyote was a sacred medicine, used with water during Native American church ceremonies. So Quanah Parker endorsed the half-moon style of the peyote ceremony, distinct from the later cross ceremony influenced by Caddo practices introduced by John Wilson. Quanah Parker has a really cool quote about this. So one of the main things he talked about, the difference between the white man's church and Indian church, is he would say, quote, "The white man goes into his church house and talks about Jesus, but the Indian goes into his teepee and talks to Jesus." I think that's a pretty incredible quote. So the modern reservation era in Native American history owes much of the adoption of the church and Christianity is spearheaded by Quanah Parker and a man named John Wilson, which we talked about for a second there. Although not part of a traditional Native American religious practices, this movement gained prominence in the late 19th century, blending cultures from both Native Americans of Mexico and other southern tribes with ancient use of peyote and spiritual practices. So Quanah Parker advocated for the mindful use. Let's circle back on that. The mindful use, not just smoking peyote all day, but using it, the mind-altering substances for ritual purposes. So while Quanah Parker, as we said before, he earned praise for cultural guardianship amongst many tribes, he is not immune to criticism, particularly from some Comanche quarters. Detractors argued that he had sold out to the white man, which I can see that. We fight to the end, and I mean, they did get kind of whipped in Adobe walls, but they did surrender, and he adapted his life to like a traditional rancher's lifestyle. Critics pointed to his dressing and his living style, which some perceived as more like European American than traditional Comanche. A man named Paul Schatt Smith framed the debate as the basic Comanche political question, is questioning whether Quanah Parker is a sellout or a patriot. But he did embrace European American customs, but he did also maintain his identity by consistently wearing his hair long and in braids. It's like every single picture we have shown is him in his braids, which are so awesome looking. And he still resisted the conformity of U.S. marriage laws. He had up to 8 wives at the same time, so he was not going to get rid of that part of his culture. So let's move on to how we know some of this stuff and his life aside from the church. So we can see correspondence between Quanah Parker and a man named Samuel Birch Burnett Sr., and his son Thomas Lloyd Burnett reveal mutual admiration and respect. See, while historical records provide limited information about Quanah Parker until his involvement in the attack on Buffalo Hunters at Adobe Walls, there's only like fragmented details with his interaction with Apache, and that could lead to how he discovered the peyote religion, kind of dipping his toes into that and taking the adoption of the Native American church. Quanah Parker's involvement kind of evolved on tribal lands, opening for Anglo ranching interests. It led to close relations with Texas cattlemen, including the Burnett family, which we just talked about. So he said, if we're going to put on this reservation, we're going to make some money on it because it's not going to be really given to us. We can see that now. It's penance. So by 1884, Quanah Parker's efforts facilitated the tribe's first grass payments for grazing rights, strengthening the bonds between him and his friends, the Burnetts. Burnett, with a genuine respect for Native American rights, learned and embraced Comanche ways, passing his appreciation and friendship to his family. The Comanches bestowed upon him the name, and I'm going to try to pronounce it, Massasoit, meaning big boss, pretty cool name, reflecting their regard for Burnett. Quanah Parker's adaptation to the white man's life led to prosperity as a rancher, and you can, like I said, you can still see Star House to this day. It is was part of an amusement park, kind of moved to somebody's actual property. There's been a lot of movement for people to take that, have that moved to like a place where it could be preserved. Right now, they can't get through to the owner for them to let go of Star House. It is owned on somebody's property. You can drive by it. It's in pretty bad disrepair. But if you read the most recent book about Quanah Parker's life, and it just escapes me at this second, but they kind of go into some detail about it. So, over the next 27 years, Quanah Parker and the Burnetts shared numerous experiences, including their involvement in public events and discussions with Theodore Roosevelt, like we talked about earlier. Burnett's assistance in significant manners, such as Quanah Parker's request to retain tribal ownership of lands and the relocation of his mother and sister's remains, further solidified their enduring friendship. So in 1872, Quanah Parker, according to his son Baldwin Parker, who actually filmed in was an actor in some silent films, which is kind of wild that we're not that far removed from Quanah Parker and the Wild West. Baldwin Parker said that Quanah entered matrimony with 2 wives. His first, Tahoe hailed from the Mescalero Apache tribe, the daughter of their chief Old Wolf. Acquiring her for 5 mules, doesn't seem like that much. Their union only lasted a year as Tahoe struggled with the Comanche language. Upon her request to return home, Quanah Parker sent her back to her people. His second wife in 1872, Wekia, was the daughter of Yellow Bear, a Penatica Comanche sub-chief. Despite initial complications, including her engagement to another warrior, some Comanche drama for you, she and Quanah Parker eloped, later reconciling with Yellow Bear. The amalgamation of the 2 bands formed the largest force of Comanche Indians. Quanah Parker eventually took 6 more wives, and their names I'm going to try to pronounce: Choni or Shoni, Macheta Wookie, Wutham Takum, Kobe, Tope, and Tanarsi. A photograph from the 1890s captured by William B. Ellis showcased Quanah Parker and 2 of his wives, identified as Tope and Shoni. In addition, Quanah Parker had a total of 8 wives and 25 children, and he adopted some of them. On the day that Quanah Parker took his last breath, his wives and children quietly mourned his departure, marking the occasion with two distinct ceremonies. An article published on March 29th of 1911 in Leavenworth Times of Leavenworth, Kansas, detailed the first ceremony, which was a tribal ritual. As the sun rose in the day following Quanah's passing, Marcus Poco, a chief medicine man and preacher for the tribe, led the observance. Marcus Polo believed that to have Mexican and Comanche roots. He donned a buckskin suit adorned with a buckskin bag containing the chief's cherished feathers, trinkets, and jewelry, including a diamond brooch presented by his cattleman friends. Commencing their observance, Marcus Poco praised the chief and invoked the Great Spirit to welcome him. Subsequently, the funeral procession proceeded to the location for the second ceremony held at the Post Oak Mission Cemetery. The second ceremony unfolded at 3 p.m. And was overseen by Reverend A.J. Becker, a local Mennonite missionary. Reverend Becker and his wife, Magdalena, had dedicated themselves to missionary work among the Comanche since the establishment of the Post Oak Mission around a decade prior. Following the sermon, attendees joined in singing the Swan Dirge, and then the chief was laid to rest near the resting place of his mother, Cynthia, where, remember, they got her remains moved. Reverend and Mrs. Becker continued their service at the mission until the minister's retirement in 1941, forming close bands with the Comanche people and who affectionately gave them nicknames. In his book, The Last Comanche Chief, author Bill Neely reflects on Quanah and Cynthia, stating, quote, "Separated in life, they were united in death." In 1957, a significant expansion of Fort Sill led to the reburial of Cynthia and Quanah at the Fort Sill Post Cemetery in Lawton, which you can actually go see today.